Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Kevin Connors connecting the chat right now. So if you have questions for today's Holistic Health Hour, please do so. You could go ahead and chat those questions in. I have a number of questions that went via our holistichealthhour.com website. So if you have questions that you want to get in, you can't listen to this live, make sure you just go to holistichealthhour.com where you'll see an archive of all our old Holistic Health Hour uh, podcasts, along with nicely archived um, data on what each one is about. So if you're searching for specific questions. And I will remind you later to also go to our website, connorsclinic.com, where you'll find 1,000 or so blog posts, many with videos, answering a ton of different questions. So let's jump right in. Today's question, first one is, hello, my brother-in-law who doesn't drink was told that he has NASH, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Would your clinic be able to help him with this process? His doctor said to lose weight, and that's it. He has had bleeding with his bowel movements for the past 5 years or so. It's sad doctors just ignore and dismiss. I watched Nathan Crane's documentary, The Missing Link, Conquering Cancer, and learned of your practice. So I'll tell you, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is super common. So I would actually doubt that is what is the cause of his bleeding. So you got to investigate that separately. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is just going to cause dysfunction with the liver. So you're going to have a decrease rate of detoxification. And as that progresses, it's going to affect the liver's ability to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, the production of bile. You could end up with blocked bile ducts. You can have all sorts of problems with fatty liver disease, and that's something that is not to be ignored. Now, how do you treat that? That's another thing. Helping with the detox pathways, I would certainly look at this person's genetic detox pathways as well to see what needs to be supported there. But I don't believe that that's going to be a causative factor of causing bleeding in the stools. So with bleeding in the stools, that's a differential diagnosis pattern you have to go through. It's very common to have red blood in your stools if you have a fissure, a broken, what's called a fissure in your anal area, which is basically a broken blood vessel, and you'll get red blood in your stools. That is extremely common. Everybody's probably had that at any given time, usually from having difficult bowel movements, straining at the stool, etc. You can have hemorrhoids causing a bleeding hemorrhoid, causing red blood in the stool. If it's darker stool, or you have a consistently dark stool or black stool or a tarry stool, you have to consider bleeding higher up, and the blood is becoming digested basically, and then you're getting this black tarry stool. Now that's a totally different issue. That's most likely a bleeding ulcer, could be stomach ulcer or duodenal ulcer. So you want to investigate that. So for the doctor, if he had told his physician that he had bleeding stools for the last 5 years and the physician didn't recommend a colonoscopy or something like that, boy, I had a hard time believing that that could be just ignored. So you definitely want to investigate that a little deeper. Always with bleeding stools, you're concerned about polyps, you're concerned about other issues that of course depends on what color the blood is, because that tells you how high it is. Anal issues, rectal issues, etc. And you want to investigate that. It's not something to be ignored. Now, certainly fatty liver disease isn't something to be ignored either. And just losing weight, would that help? Well, sure, it would help, because you'd have to clean up your diet to lose weight typically. So as you're cleaning up your diet, you're going to be helping to clean up the liver. So this person should have gotten a complete metabolic panel to look at liver markers, should look at CBC markers. This should be the least amount of blood work to do, a complete CBC with differential, complete metabolic panel with liver markers. And I would also look at total lipids, a complete lipid panel. So could we help a person with this? Well, I don't know if we could help a person with this, but we'd certainly want to do some more investigation to get down to some root causes and to deal with those root causes. Just to say that, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is common and you just lose weight is just, to me, ridiculous, because you're not getting to the cause and not getting to help solve this person's issues. Why is fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, getting to be so common? That would be another question. And I believe it's because of the amount of toxins in our environment. We're exposed to way more toxins, quantity-wise, than our ancestors ever were. And that puts a lot of stress on our liver pathways. And when we put that much stress on our liver pathways, we can get laydown of fats. And that's in an attempt to try to heal that. And that's where that comes from. So, yes, I would say cleaning up a person's diet would be important, but digging into some specific toxins and how to support detoxification of those toxins make more sense. And that's, to me, the practice of standard medicine saying that they want to get much more specialized and much more unique, and then they still do stuff like this is kind of sad. But yeah, they could, if you are watching this and you have any interest in contacting our clinic, you could go to connersclinic.com, call our clinic, or you could actually schedule a case review. That's what we call your initial appointment with me. It's a 30-minute online, over the phone communication that we have, going over your case and see if your case is something that I think we can help you with, or you feel comfortable working with us. So anybody can do that. So, all right, next question. Hello, Dr. Connors. I suffer from chronic Lyme, and I have for many years. In the last months, added significant breast pain to my other symptoms. May I ask what this is about? What is the cause? Thanks a lot for your answer. So, breast pain in itself wouldn't be necessarily a common issue from Lyme disease. So then you got to go, why do you have breast pain? So you got to remember, sometimes when we have an issue like cancer, so let's say you have breast cancer and now you're having pain in your gut, does that mean you have metastasis to the gut? Do you mean that the gut pain is tied to the cancer? And it certainly is a question that we need to ask. But it's common that when we have a serious, already diagnosed condition like chronic Lyme, that we want to attribute other morbidities to that disease, and it's not always fair. Now, of course, everything is tied together in your body. So if you have chronic Lyme and inflammation from that chronic Lyme, could that inflammation be affecting the breast? Why, certainly it could. But if this is something new, then you've had like this, I don't know who asked this question, but it sounds like whoever asked this question has had chronic Lyme for some time and now has a new symptom of breast pain. I would investigate that. Now, usually, I would say usually, and we'll underline that word, if a person has breast pain, that's a sign of inflammation or some sort of inflammatory process going on at that spot where the pain is. Usually, cancers don't cause pain, but inflammatory breast disease and inflammatory breast cancer can. So I would certainly get that checked out. If you're not inclined to do a mammogram, I would definitely do a thermography to get that spot checked out and see what's going on. If you're palpating it, you don't palpate any lumps or anything, but there's a specific spot of pain. I don't know. This is all the question that was asked. I'd be asking the question if we were communicating one-on-one. Is the breast pain in a certain spot? Can you point to that spot? Or is it in both breasts equally? Is it cover the entire breast or both breasts? The more diffuse the pain would be, the more I would think that it's due to just general inflammation. Some tests that you could do, I already mentioned a mammogram or a thermography. Other tests would, for systemic inflammation, would be to do a complete metabolic panel and a CBC, get uh, just some blood work done to see if there's, make sure you're including C-reactive protein and uh, and um, uh, some inflammatory markers in that panel so you can see if there's a source of inflammation. If it's been going on a few months, could it be an infection? Yes, a chronic infection can last months or years. Um, Typically, that will show up on a CBC. You'll see an elevated white blood cell count. So those are some things that you want to investigate. So, like anything, when you have symptoms, symptoms are a sign of something going on. So you always want to ask, what is this a sign of? What is my body trying to tell me? How do I dig to get to the root cause of this? Um, and that's how you want to correct it. So you always want to look at, okay, what is this? Is this caused by my Lyme disease? Is this caused by something else? You want to figure that out in order to treat it properly and to give your the best chance of you healing from it. Okay, a question came in on the chat. Remember, you could chat in your questions. It's from a Facebook user. I had an allergic reaction, I think, to hydroxyzine because of my jaw locked and my body. And then I realized I was numb in my private area in my body. I also got suicidal thoughts. An alternative medicine pediatrician said to do NEAT allergy test. I have already went to a neurologist and an endocrinologist. So if you've had a reaction to a medication, can you get long-standing symptoms from that? The answer is yes, you can. So usually a reaction to a food, you're going to get symptoms that will wane over time if you've cleared that out of your body. If you have a reaction to a medication, you could get symptoms that can last longer. I would think that if you got symptoms like this, where it affected your whole body, it's more likely uh, symptoms because it's you have inflammation in the brain. It's called an upper motor neuron lesion, where you have something going on in the brain. If you have, there's certain medications that can easily cross the blood-brain barrier, and it can be a cause of an inflammatory process going on in the brain, and then you're going to get these weird symptoms that can affect one side of the body or both sides of the body, um, and don't seem to make sense. So let me take a step back. You get symptoms um, when you're evaluating symptoms. You're evaluating, where is this symptom coming from? So if I get a symptom where it's very specific, let's say my left hand is hurting from my wrist down, the first thing you're going to think of is, did I fall on my wrist? Did I injure my wrist when I was lifting weights? Did I wrench something? And as we get older, you can start hurting, you know, hours after you actually injured yourself, because this inflammatory process just ramps up. But when you got symptoms that cross the midline of your body, so they're on both sides of the body, or they're on the entire one side of your body, left or right, and it's not making any sense based upon an injury or a musculoskeletal issue, you got to understand that your brain controls your whole body. And if you smashed your left toe, where do you feel the pain? Well, you feel it in the left toe, but actually the left toe pain sensors are firing back up to the brain, crossing over and into my right side of my parietal lobe of my brain. And that's what's telling my rest of my brain to move my toe. This is happening instantaneously. So you move your toe out of the way of that danger when you just hit your toe. So you're actually feeling the pain. You're actually sensing the pain in your opposite parietal lobe. So if I have an inflammatory process that starts in my brain, let's say, I have a reaction to a medication in some case like this, that's crossed my blood-brain barrier and caused an inflammatory process in the brain. If it's throughout my whole brain, it can affect both parietal lobes, and I can get these weird, crazy sensations throughout my body. Um, the problem with that is it's harder to get rid of inflammation in the brain than it is anywhere else in the body. So that can last a long time. There's different medication reactions that people have had to different classifications of antibiotics that has lasted a lifetime, and it changed their whole life. Um, and there's actually Facebook groups of people that were exposed to these things. Same thing with other different medications, people that have had allergic reactions to them that have lasted their whole life. And most of the time, it's because they cause this inflammatory process in the brain and then damaged the brain's glial system that helps get rid of those things. Those are called your microglial cells that helps get rid of stuff in your brain. And when you damage those microglial cells, they're called primed microglial cells. And that can just be an inflammatory process in itself. So I've referred to the video that I made on multiple holistic health hours, then I'll refer you to it too. If you go to our website, in the search bar of our website is connorsclinic.com, and you start searching neurological inflammation, just start typing that, you'll see a blog post come up about neurological inflammation. I made about a 30-minute video about neurological inflammation and microglial priming and what to do about it from a natural perspective. So I'm going to refer you to go to that because quite honestly, I agree. You're going to go to a neurologist and endocrinologist and all this stuff, and they're just going to go, well, I don't know, maybe you just need to go to a psychiatrist, because they don't. The studies that I cite in that video are not alternative studies. They are studies that were done when millions of dollars were poured into brain inflammation a few years back when the National Football League was being sued for post-concussive syndrome issues. So the studies are out there. The information is out there. It's just not looked at. So I point you to some of the data that is the best data on how to deal with that. So if you need help, you can make an appointment with me, but I'd start with watching that video. Another Facebook user, hello, I have Hashimoto's and irritable bowel syndrome. I'm finding it hard to find healthy proteins to eat with every meal that are soy-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, no peanuts, as I have noticed they make me swell up. Thank you so much. So, irritable bowel syndrome is basically a collection of symptoms that people get a diagnosis of that isn't specific. So, can celiac cause irritable bowel syndrome? Yeah. Well, can food antibodies cause irritable bowel syndrome? Yes. So you have this collection of symptoms that we're going to call irritable bowel syndrome. Could it be Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disorder? If you haven't been tested, the answer is yes, it could be. So you want to do some more testing. If you have gluten sensitivity, dairy sensitivity, you notice that peanuts bother you, you notice that soy bothers you, it might be good to do a Cyrex Array 10 lab test if you haven't done that already. And that's going to test for other foods that you may be sensitive to, because you could be sensitive to different proteins, different meat products. You could be sensitive to, other nuts have protein in it, other things that you're trying to eat that maybe don't bother you right at the time that you eat, but then you have it it exacerbates your other symptoms. So it's hard to find, if you have multiple food antibodies, it's hard to pinpoint what they are sometimes, because you're not necessarily eating any of these foods, uniquely at a one given time. So you could say, oh, yep, I know it was that, as much as it would, but as much as it might be easy if you ate gluten or dairy or peanuts. So running a Cyrex Array 10 lab to really investigate deeper what foods that you need to calm down, how you need to eliminate those foods for a period of time to calm down the inflammation in your gut, might be a good thing to do. Otherwise, we're just shooting in the dark. You could Google a list of proteins and start eating them. And there's nothing wrong with that. Let's say, I don't know who you are, but you might say, I don't have money to run a lab like that. That's a lot of money. Um, can I just try this on my own? Well, certainly. You could Google a list um, of proteins and try them one by one. And boy, I can eat lamb. That doesn't bother me. But if I eat chicken, that bothers me. Okay, then you might have antibodies to chicken, and you might not with lamb or fish or whatever it is. And you could go one by one to, uh, basically test yourself with a food elimination type diet. So that's safe to do that too. But running a Cyrex 10 might be a wise thing to do if you can afford to do. Next question. I never had any problems with gluten, but was advised to follow a gluten-free diet because of Hashimoto's. So whoever gave you that advice was wise advice. Why? Why should somebody with Hashimoto's follow a gluten-free diet? Well, I would go farther and say a person with any thyroid issues should follow a gluten-free diet, because gliadin, the protein of gluten, is a molecular mimic to the thyroid gland. So if you're eating a food that is a molecular mimic to the thyroid gland and you have any thyroid issues, every time you eat gluten, you can cause inflammation to the thyroid gland. And if you have Hashimoto's, you have a diagnosed Hashimoto's, so you have elevated thyroglobulin antibodies and or PTO antibodies, then you already know that that you would cause destruction of the thyroid. So eating gluten, which is a molecular mimic to the thyroid, would cause further destruction of the thyroid. So anybody with Hashimoto's, or I would say even if you have primary hypothyroidism, and certainly if you have Graves' or Hashimoto's, you should not be eating any gluten. So that was a wise choice by your practitioner. Next question that came in on the Holistic Health Hour site. A friend of mine was just diagnosed with celiac. Oh, ties right into this. What would you say are the most important things to do beyond just eating a gluten-free diet? And can it be healed? Well, it partly depends on how bad the celiac disease is. So celiac disease is diagnosed through a biopsy of the intestinal wall, and this person not only has antibodies to gliadin peptides, but they have antibodies to gliadin itself. And the celiac disease is much more serious. So many times people with serious celiac disease can't even walk by a bakery without having a reaction. So they'll breathe that in, and it causes inflammation throughout their whole body. Can it be healed? Depends on who you ask. Some people say it can never be healed. And I just said a little bit ago that if you do a Cyrex Array 10, when you look at different food antibodies and you stay away from those foods, those antibodies to those foods will dissipate. But there are some foods that just, antibodies to certain foods that just don't tend to dissipate. And gliadin is one of those. So can it be healed? Well, I think God could heal anything. But realistically, can it be healed? Probably not. You're probably realistically looking at managing it the rest of your life. What else should you do though? And this would answer what else should you do to the person who asked the Facebook question before. If you have other food sensitivities, just staying away from that food is inadequate. So if you know you have antibodies to celiac, you know you have antibodies to gliadin, I mean, and you have a diagnosed celiac disease, you absolutely should be doing a Cyrex Array 10 to look for antibodies to other foods because there are gliadin cross reactants. So another test to do would be a Cyrex Array 4, which tests specifically for all the cross reactants to gluten. So a person can have antibodies to gluten, and whether they have celiacs or not, and they stayed away from gluten, but they're eating foods that are cross-reactant to gluten, so they can't figure out why they're not getting better and staying away from gluten. But every time they eat those foods that are cross-reactants to gluten, that they also have antibodies against, they're causing more inflammation, which stems back to a basic understanding of immunology is that you can't be stimulating an immune system when you have antibodies, particularly antibodies to self tissue. So with celiac, you have antibodies to self tissue. So every time you're going to cause inflammation in the gut, you're going to damage your gut border. Um, but same thing goes if you have antibodies to other tissue, like in the question of Hashimoto's or diagnosed with Hashimoto's. You have antibodies to your thyroid gland. Every time you cause inflammation due to whatever, but certainly one of the most common ways that we cause daily inflammation is through our diet. So if we're eating foods that we have antibodies against, you're causing inflammation in the gut and systemically, and you're going to destroy that which you have antibodies against, whether it's your gut wall in celiac disease, or whether it's your thyroid gland, or whether it's you have rheumatoid arthritis and you're damaging your joint capsule cells. If you have MS, you're going to be damaging myelin sheath cells. So every time you cause inflammation in your body, you're going to damage and destroy that which you have antibodies against first. If it's self antibodies, you're going to be destroying self tissue. So very important to find hidden sources of inflammation. And the most common hidden source of inflammation are food that you're eating. So if you're eating foods that you're inadvertently causing inflammation in the gut, and you might not even have symptoms, but you're causing inflammation throughout your whole body. And this is the misdiagnosed or mismanaged part of autoimmune disorders. So, um, managing autoimmune disorders is first of all diagnosing them. Okay, so I have an autoimmune disease, and now I have to find my triggers that are stimulating my immune reaction. Could be supplements I'm taking in, could be in chronic infections that I'm dealing with, could be foods that I'm eating. So, if you want a lot more deeper dive of that, you could join my chronic disease and autoimmune course. It's $50, and you can start going through a whole mess of videos and really do a deep dive of finding your triggers, knowing what labs to run. I give you a ton of different information in there. I just have a whole bunch of videos on that course that will help you walk through that path. Next question on Facebook or something here. I have a friend going to Mexico because of a tumor. I realize in Mexico you can get treatments you can't get in the United States, but are the Mexico clinics helpful or of no value? Um, I think the Mexico clinics are great. So I would never bash another practitioner's clinic anyhow. But the truth is, these days you could probably get just about everything that you're getting in Mexico in the United States. So I used to say that you couldn't, but that's not the case anymore. So you might be able to get it less expensive, but that's not necessarily the case anymore either. So I've had patients go down to, so I don't know, whoever's listening to this might not know really what we do here, but 90% of patients, members in our clinic have cancer. So we're mainly an alternative cancer. We see autoimmune and Lyme patients and help with right frequencies and things. So we have had throughout the years our experience with lots of people that have gone to Mexico before they came to us, or went to Mexico concurrently with seeing us and us managing their case too. Um, a lot of people had great um, experiences in Mexico. But over the years, now things have loosened up in the United States. So a lot of things that were only available in Mexico are now available in the United States. And unfortunately, the prices have gone up dramatically in Mexico. It used to be go down there, you go down there for 3 weeks, and for $20,000 or something, 3 weeks of care, they did a bunch of different things to you. Well, now you might spend 60 grand down there. So the prices have really risen down there. So I don't see as much value in going down there as if you would have asked me that question 10 years ago. Um, so, but I mean, if they thought about it, prayed about it, investigated it, and they want to go to Mexico, by all means. Certainly, if they want to have a discussion with us, they can. At the very least, if you could point them to our website to give them some, so they can look at and see some of the things that we do. The only other thing I don't like about the Mexico clinics is some of them are, they were developed by, okay, the Hoxsey Clinic in Mexico. They were, initially developed by Dr. Hoxsey, who was basically run out of Texas, and in the 1950s, we went down there. So what do they offer at the Hoxsey Clinic? They only offer Hoxsey. Well, we can get Hoxsey here now, which is an herbal concoction. At the clinic, so they're very specific to kind of their ancestry of the clinic of what they offer. Um, so there's that. That's the only other negative that I'd say about that. Next question. Teething remedies for under 12 months. Clove oil, and what dilution for a tincture, frozen breast milk popsicles, anything else you have natural for teething remedies. Yeah, there's homeopathic teething remedies that can be very beneficial. I don't know if we sell those on our store, um, but if you just Google homeopathic teething remedies, I think they're available. Pretty much any. At least you could order them. Um, uh, my grandkids have used. My kids have used homeopathic teething remedies for kids. Certainly, breast milk popsicles, as this person mentioned, that is a great thing to use too. Clove oil is what's called a hot oil, and it could if you put clove oil in your kid's mouth, they might not want you to stick your finger in their mouth with anything on it again. I know they're under 12 months, but you'd want to water that down a little bit. I know there's some companies that make a clove oil that is made to take orally, so it is kind of quote unquote watered down already. So you could look into that as well. Next question. I saw a video of yours talking about chronic infections being a cause of illness. How do you test for that? Okay, so testing. So chronic infections can be a cause of illness, but they can be a chronic viral infection, a chronic bacterial infection, or a chronic like spirochete, like tick-borne illness infection. So you use different tests for that. If you thought you had a chronic Lyme or something like that, there is a Lyme PCR test that we have on our. It's available on our lab store, and if you find information on to answer this question on our that same course, the chronic disease and autoimmune course. But you'd run a Lyme test. So you'd see if you have antibodies and current antibodies to Lyme disease and a co-infection. So Lyme disease technically is Borrelia burgdorferi. It's a gram-negative bacteria, but it carries along with it a number of different co-infections. So you'd want to test for all those co-infections as well. If you thought you had a chronic bacterial infection, which actually is very common, or a chronic viral infection, understand you can have more than one of these things going on at the same time. Um, Many times you'll pick those up on standard labs. So I pick those up on standard CBC. That's a complete blood count with differential. You can see a slightly elevated um, white blood cell count. So normal white blood cell count, if you look at a lab, so if you ran a CBC, you'd see a normal white blood cell count. Every lab's normal is a little bit different, but it'd be about between 4 and 11. But really, your functional normal for white blood cell count is really about 4.5 to 7. Some people would even say 6.5. If you have anything over 6.5 or 7, you definitely have an infection. Now, many times you'll look at past labs of a person, if you have a history of labs, and they have a past lab white blood cell count that has been running 8, 9 for the past several years. I see that all the time with chronic Lyme patients, with chronic infection patients. You see this all the time. So it's not a current infection, nor do they have symptoms of a current infection. Well, take that back. They really do have a current infection, but they don't have symptoms of like a current hot infection. Like they don't have a fever. They're not like ill. They just have not felt well for several years. So they'll have a slightly elevated, meaning above functional normal, but maybe even within the range of lab range. So it'll be less than 11, 11.5, but it'll be above 7. Um, that's a sign you have an infection. Then you can look at the differential of the white blood cell count and you could get an idea if there's an elevated neutrophil count versus lymphocyte count, then it's more likely a chronic bacterial infection. If it's an elevated lymphocyte count and a suppressed neutrophil count, it's more likely a chronic um, viral infection. But quite honestly, I've seen where those were normal or they were in balance, the percentage between the two, because the person had both a chronic bacterial infection and a chronic viral infection. So it can get a little confusing. There is some other more specific labs that you can do. Cyrex has an array 11 and array 12 where you can get into the minutia of that and see what it is that we're looking for. So if we have to, there's different labs that you can run to get into the minutia of what it is that we're actually dealing with. But the truth is, many times people are dealing with more than one thing. So they may have had a suppressed immune system for a period of time, maybe going through a high amount of stress. They're exposed to different viruses or bacteria. Their immune system just wasn't able to fight that off. In my chronic Lyme course, I actually give some reasons why this happens. Different bacteria can tend to hide in the system, just like different Lyme and bacteria and co-infections can actually mimic your normal microbiota and hide in the normal microbiota so that your immune system doesn't recognize it as an enemy. And worse a scenario, they can go intracellularly. So viruses go intracellularly normally, and they replicate inside the cell and cause dysfunction of the cell, and then can go outside of the cell and make the person sick, and then can hide back inside the cell. When bacteria goes inside the cell, it's even worse, and that's a very common thing. So H. pylori is a common bacteria, so is the Burgdorferi bacteria from chronic Lyme. So you have to dig into different labs to test what that would be. Somebody posted that we don't have it in our store, but the Hylands, Hylands brand, if you go to hylands.com, is a good source for the homeopathic stuff for TB, which is very beneficial. So I think a lot of my grandkids have used that. Somebody else posted we used the Calcarea phosphorica 6X. Looking for more things, though. And the next question, what about ways to reduce EMF and improve babies' sleep quality? Well, the number one way that you could reduce EMF Um, and the proper way to say it is to reduce, because you're never going to remove EMFs. Unless you put your whole house in a Faraday cage. That would be the only way to do it, which I'm being facetious because that's not possible. But to reduce EMFs, turn off your Wi Fi, have your baby's room away from the Wi Fi. This can be extremely difficult if you're living in an apartment building or a townhouse. So that's why, if at all possible, do not live in an apartment building or a townhouse. So when you talk about EMFs, you're getting the most amount of EMFs from 5G towers that are near your house, and your Wi-Fi and your cell phones. That's you're getting your greatest number of EMFs, greatest quantity of EMFs. And if you're living in an apartment building or a townhouse, how many people within 150-foot radius of you have a Wi-Fi going? A lot. So you just think of that exposure of EMFs. Your neighbor right next to the wall, right next to you, has a Wi-Fi. The neighbor on the other side wall that's adjacent to you has a Wi-Fi. The people upstairs and adjacent to them, the people downstairs and adjacent to them in an apartment or townhouse, you're getting a high exposure to EMF. So just turning off your Wi-Fi is good, but your neighbors aren't doing that. So it's very difficult. Um, and so if you had your own home that's far enough away from your neighbor's Wi-Fi, better off you're going to be. If you're concerned about your child, look at even um, their adjacent rooms on what where they could be getting Wi-Fi exposure. Even if you have a house and you're living in your own house, but the next house is only 20 feet away, and if those neighbors have their Wi-Fi on that outside wall, that could be that could be crossing. You can see it when you look up your computer to search for connection. You can see all the Wi-Fi that are in the area. So that's going to be your greatest source of EMFs. Keeping your phones away from your bed and your children's bed, of course, keeping them away from screen time as much as possible. If you're talking about your child not being able to sleep well, if your child is getting the screen time, hopefully a little baby isn't getting screen time, but it's not uncommon that people these days will allow their 2-year old to be, to sit and watch movies or something. If they're sitting and watching movies, remember those screens. I'm sitting here looking at a computer right now. This screen on the computer is resonating at 60 hertz. All screens resonate at 60 hertz, whether it's your television, your phone, or your computer screens or whatever. It's basically entraining your brain at 60 hertz. Your brain needs to get down to about 7 hertz for you to be able to fall asleep. So if you're training your brain at 60 hertz and you can't figure out why you can't fall asleep after looking at your phone, because you just did brain entrainment for however long I'm sitting here for an hour doing this talk right now, you need to get out and ground yourself or get away from the screen for a period of time to get your brain to calm back down to a normal uh, brain level. So it's a very high hertz that you're training your brain at. So it's not just EMFs that can keep you awake, but certainly EMFs are a major cause of issues in our environment and that you cannot ignore anymore. It's a real thing. So, good question. Do everything you possibly can to reduce EMFs. Just think of where the sources of those are. Um, there are different grounding things that you could use. There's EMFs that are coming from your electrical system in your house. You got wires running all around your house, up to the light up there and down to the wall over here. There's a phenomena called dirty electricity that gives off EMFs in your house. We have some products in our store called Satic products. That's the brand that helps get rid of that dirty electricity. We have that in our house. I have it here at the office, um, because that's a real thing as well. So you just try to do as many things as you possibly can. In our store, we have a lot of EMF things. I talked about a Faraday cage. If you could put your house in a Faraday cage, but you can put your phone in a Faraday cage. You could put your router in a Faraday cage. we have those. We have cloth Faraday cages that you can actually slip your phone into, and you can't just leave it in there because you won't get any calls because it's a true Faraday cage. You won't get any messages. But when you take it out, then all these messages will come through. But but it does block what you're getting from your phone. I did a video a couple weeks ago on EMFs from a computer, and quite honestly, you really don't get that many EMFs from a computer. I actually had it on my other computer, and I was testing EMFs. But when you're connected to the Wi-Fi and you're getting information downloading on your computer, that's when you're going to get EMFs. It was kind of odd because I was talking about EMFs for the Rife computer, and then the meter kept bouncing up and down, but I was filming this video with my phone, and when my phone got closer to the meter, that's when it just bounced way up. So the majority of EMFs were coming from my phone, hardly any EMFs from the computer itself. So those are the kind of things you just want to be aware of. You can buy a very inexpensive EMF meter at your local hardware store, and you can test your stuff too, and see how to best protect yourself. I often share a story. Years ago, I had a patient whose child started getting seizures, and when we tested the child with kinesiology, it came up due to EMFs. So I had to question. We were just kind of putting on our Sherlock Holmes hat, trying to figure out. This is when computers just were fairly new on the market. It had been out on the market maybe 10 years. I can't remember. This is back in the early 2000s or maybe late 90s. And the dad had just purchased a brand new laptop, and that is when the child started having seizures. And we tested the laptop, and it was like off the chart with EMFs. All he did is bring his laptop back. It was a brand new laptop, so he could bring it back to Best Buy at the time, traded it in for a new laptop. There must have been the laptop worked fine, but there must have been some little short in it that was just, I don't know, have no idea to this day, and the kid's seizures went away. So for doctors to say EMFs aren't causing issues is just absolute foolishness. There's enough data out there now, even though most of it's been suppressed by the cell phone companies because they don't want you to know. But I don't think anybody's going to get rid of their cell phones, even if more and more data came out that cell phones are causing brain cancer. People would still use their cell phones. It's just, it's just a lifestyle that we have grown accustomed to use. But anything you could do to get rid of EMFs and help EMFs with grounding equipment, grounding sheets, things like that would be better off to do. A few more questions. Do you know what would be best for uric acid in the sole or heel of your foot? So uric acid is an issue with that causes gout and gouty arthritis. Uric acid is usually excreted by the kidneys, so supporting kidney function is good. And decreasing diet, you can Google search, I don't remember everything, but things that will increase uric acid, foods that will increase uric acid. I know beer is one, some alcohol can be another one. And then there's some common things that we've used for people with increased uric acid, which would be like cherry juice. There's concentrated cherry supplements out there. I think pomegranate juice could be helpful. And then that's the biggest thing. And then looking at lymph flow, so helping support lymph flow so that it's not settling in your lower extremities. You're able to get it back to the kidneys and excrete it. And again, supporting kidney function. Okay, I am going to have to sign off for the day. I thank you for the questions. We had a few more questions that had been submitted on the Holistic Health Hour. We'll get to those next week. Remember, go to holistichealthhour.com and you can see all our past episodes, and they're well indexed if you're looking for specific things. And go to our website, connersclinic.com, where you'll see well over 1,000 blog posts on everything you could possibly think of. So look for those things. I'm going to take this last question here. Detox for babies from heavy metals or any bad chemicals in the you-know-what. Um, so very, very important. So I gotta answer that question. Okay, so if you know that your baby has exposed to the you know what, and how would you help them detox that? Well, I would highly suggest you look at my 7 Phases of Detox book. I think it's still available as a free download on our website. Um, and we have a whole course on the 7 Phases of Detox where I go into detail. It's very common that people were exposed to something. They know they were exposed to something, or they went and did some heavy metal test and they know they have mercury or something like that, that they jump to the last phase of detox, which I call phase zero, which is chelation. So they think of, okay, well, I got to get this out of my body, so I'm going to start using a chelator to pull it out of my body. And I think there's a lot of danger in doing that. You have to start at the beginning. You have to support the liver pathway, um, and but at the very beginning is just support how you get rid of it into the toilet. So that's the end point. So when you're trying to heal the digestive system, you start at the beginning. You make sure saliva is good. You make sure the person's chewing. Then you make sure that their hydrochloric acid is good in their stomach and all the way down. When you're supporting detoxification, you start at the end. Are they having good bowel movements? Are they binding stuff in the gut so they're not reabsorbing it and having it to go through the liver again? Is their bile flow good? So they have a healthy gallbladder and healthy bile flow. And then you look at the liver, phase 1, 2, and 3 in the liver, and supporting those pathways. Because if you were going to just jump to chelation and pull it out of the tissues and get it into the blood, and the rate of detoxification is slow in the liver, you're not supporting phase 1, 2, 3 in the liver, it's just going to circulate and go somewhere else and cause problems. And it is going to circulate through the brain, and you can cross the blood-brain barrier. And if you're talking about a child less than 3 years old, they really have a fairly non-existent blood-brain barrier, so it could easily get into the brain. And that's when you get into whole sorts of inflammation and causes of all sorts of problems. So you do not want to jump to chelation with a kid, for sure. An adult, you certainly don't too, but definitely with a child under 3, I would not use chelators. So you're just going to support natural detox pathways through phase 6, which is, I call getting it out into the toilet. That's healthy bowel movements. Phase 5, binding it in the gut. You could definitely use binders that are not absorbed. Phase 4 is making sure bowel flow is good. Phase 1, 2, 3, which is all in the liver. You don't do anything with phase 0 with chelation with children. Lots more on that on our website. If you look up 7 Phases of Detox, or you can download my book, The 7 Phases of Detox, or go to the course, The 7 Phases of Detox. Hopefully that will all help. All right, you guys have a blessed day. And if you want a specific conference with me, you want to talk to me personally about your issues, you can always schedule a case review on our website as well, or call our